Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and this is Megan Rathbun, the executive director for Battleship Cove and former curator for Battleship Missouri. A little over a year ago, Megan and I filmed a video together in Philadelphia talking about the crack in the Turret 3 barbette here on Missouri.
There is a crack in the barbette, and a lot of people attribute it to the grounding.
I've heard that as well.
It's not from the grounding. So there's quite a large crack in the barbette. It's still there if you know what you're looking for on the Missouri. It's very hard to spot. In fact, I didn't even see it myself. I had a coworker point it out to me.
For completion's sake, Megan and I have flown out to Pearl Harbor to see the crack again and refilm the video.
The 1950s, 1950 to be exact, Missouri ran aground. And she was stuck for 2 weeks off Hampton Roads in Virginia. And they eventually freed her after many efforts. And one of the things they did, they had cables wrapped around Turret 3. This is the barbette for Turret 3. And they pulled her out, got her floated again. She was right as rain, a little bit of damage. Fast forward to the 1980s, the ship goes into Long Beach, and they're going to be doing her modernization process, and they're worried about some of the things they're seeing on the ship. One of the things they're seeing is a huge crack in the barbette of Turret 3. Now, this crack had been there since the ship was built. It is Class A armor here. This is an original crack from her casting process in Midvale in Philadelphia. And there was concern that the grounding incident and the subsequent refloating of Missouri had put more stress or potentially more damage to this armor here, and there was concern about, what would happen when we did a high-speed run, what would happen when they fired Turret 3. So they weren't quite sure, and so they started doing extensive studies. They did x-rays on this, and essentially the issue is that Midvale had a different process for heating and then cooling the steel as they were making their Class A armor than the other two factories that were producing it for the Iowas. And what happened is they had an increased risk for laminar separation, which is exactly what's happened here. And this is actually something that if you were to crawl all through the bowels of Missouri, which I do not recommend anyone does, please stay on the tour route at all times. But if you were to start looking at other places with Class A armor, because Midvale made all this armor, you will notice other places of laminar separation. Wisconsin also has a little bit of this problem, but again, nowhere near the extent that Missouri does. So they were very worried about this. They brought in a man named Landgraf, who is very famous in the battleship community, and he did x-rays of this. They did a lot of testing, and they decided, okay, we should repair this. But it's not so much a repair, just as a cosmetic fix to make people stop worrying about it, because it's not structural. They did all the tests and it was totally fine. So what they did was they took an epoxy and they patched it. So you would never know it today, although if you run your hand on it, if you were to come visit, you can feel where we've taped off this blue here to show you where it is, because they did such a good job of patching it, you can't really see it. You can feel a difference from the steel here to where they've got this epoxy patching the crack, essentially. And Missouri went on to have a long career, as we know, in the 1980s through the Gulf War and never had a problem.
So it's worth pointing out that this is on the regular tour route. You can come and try and find it yourself. We're on the starboard aft face of barbette number 3. It's also worth pointing out that American cruisers and battleships were designed to use Turret 3 for towing, although it was more expected that they would be towing other ships in distress. Say, if we're doing the big Warplant Orange push across the Pacific and one of our battleships gets damaged, another battleship can tow it while you wait for ocean-going tugs to come up. So I love how Massachusetts still has her towing cables wrapped around Turret number 3. And all the American fast battleships would have had that during World War II. And I can't for the life of me remember the name of the cruiser, but I want to say at Santa Cruz, one of the American cruisers does tow Hornet when they're trying to get her out of the battle zone by wrapping something around her Turret 3 to hook onto there. So yeah, it is established practice. This is designed to take the load, so it's not a crack that formed from dragging the ship with... How many tugboats did they use?
Oh God, I can't remember, but they had a whole bunch of tugboats pulling the ship, and then they had 2 on the bow wiggling, trying to free her. And as they freed Missouri, she got stuck again, and they think she either caught a rock or a shipwreck or something, and that's what actually tore and actually did the actual damage to the ship during that, was when they ripped open the hull, a hole in the bottom of the hull. So they had a lot of fears after the grounding incident. Like, she would never make a high-speed run again with all this damage. But it ended up, they patched her up. She was back out, and she was fine. And now we just have the remnants of a very interesting piece of her history.
Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support, and we really appreciate Megan Rathbun flying all the way out from Battleship Cove, Massachusetts to be with us here in Pearl Harbor. You can support Battleship Missouri at Battleship Missouri in the link in the description below. You can also find their social medias there if you'd like to hear what's going on board. And you can support Battleship New Jersey by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about us in our channel. Thanks for watching.